At Christmas dinner, they mocked me about putting me in a home. So I sold everything and disappeared. I remember the exact moment it happened. The roast was dry, and the cranberry sauce too tart, but that wasn't what made the bite hard to swallow. It was when my son John, halfway into his second glass of wine, looked up from the head of the table and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "You know, Mom, maybe next year we should look into one of those nice senior communities. You know, before things start slipping." He laughed. So did his wife, Linda. Even my granddaughter snorted under her breath. Only Emily, my daughter, kept her eyes down, pushing peas around her plate. I froze. I had brought the pie, helped with the stuffing, wrapped every single gift under the tree. I had paid for the decorations, again, but none of that mattered. To them, I was just an old woman sitting at their table on borrowed time. Hold on a moment before we move forward. Let us know where in the world you're watching from. And if you're loving these stories, don't forget to hit subscribe. Tomorrow's episode is going to be absolutely mind-blowing. Nobody said it outright, but the message was clear. I was a burden. Linda topped off her glass and added, "I saw this beautiful place advertised. Looks more like a resort than a nursing home. Maybe we can take a tour together, Helen, just to get ahead of things." She smiled like she was doing me a favor. I swallowed hard. Not because I was hurt, not yet, but because I didn't want them to see the hurt. I forced a smile and nodded slightly. "Sounds lovely," I said, though my throat had tightened. Then I went back to eating as if the floor hadn't just dropped beneath me. The rest of the evening passed with more laughter, more wine, more ignoring me unless they needed something. I washed the dishes while they opened more presents. I took out the trash while John and Linda sat near the fire talking about their upcoming trip to Cabo. Nobody offered to help. Nobody thanked me. When it was finally time to leave, I gathered my coat and purse quietly. Nobody walked me to the door. It was as if I were fading already. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. I kept replaying the moment at the table, John's tone, the way Linda sipped her wine like she was proud of herself, the silence from Emily, who once used to be the only one who cared. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was done. By the next morning, I had already made the decision. I brewed coffee as usual, folded my laundry, and opened my laptop. I checked the current value of my home. It was worth more than double what I paid for it. Then, I opened my retirement account. They didn't know how much I had. They assumed, because I let them assume, that I needed help. That afternoon, I drove to the real estate office 2 blocks away and told the woman at the desk, "I want to sell my house, quietly, fast." She asked if I needed to find a new place. "Not here," I said. Within 2 weeks, it was listed. A cash buyer came in quick. I signed the papers with a steady hand and didn't tell a soul. On the day I moved out, I packed only what I could fit in my car. The rest I donated. I left the Christmas lights up. I left the mailbox key in a drawer with a note that said, "Don't call me. I'm not lost. I'm just done." Emily was the first to notice. She called me 3 days after the house closed. "Mom, where are you? John said you moved?" I didn't answer. I stared at the phone until it stopped ringing. Then I blocked her number. They had made their feelings clear. I was a task to be managed, a future problem to be contained. They didn't want me. They wanted my silence. So I gave it to them. Now, as I sit in a small rental house in a quiet town 2 states away, I watch the snow fall gently outside. I made soup this morning. I have fresh bread in the oven. I volunteer twice a week at a women's shelter. And last week I went to the movies alone for the first time in my life. Nobody here knows me as a mother, or a grandmother, or a burden. They just know me as Helen, the lady who makes good tea and always brings extra gloves to the shelter. I'm not sad. I'm not angry. I'm free. And they still have no idea what they lost. I had spent my entire life making things easier for everyone else. I didn't speak up when I should have. I kept the peace, kept the house clean, kept secrets. I raised my kids without complaining. I paid off debts that weren't mine. I loaned money I shouldn't have. And in return, I got a pamphlet for a nursing home and a joke at Christmas dinner. A week after I sold the house and disappeared, I sat alone in my new place, a small 2-bedroom rental near the edge of town, just far enough from everything that no one would find me unless I wanted to be found. The walls were beige. The furniture was secondhand. The heater ticked loudly when it kicked on, but it was quiet, and it was mine. I had given the realtor strict instructions. Don't list my forwarding address. Don't share anything. I didn't. Need legal advice. I didn't want to talk to anyone. She didn't ask questions. She didn't even blink when I paid for everything in cash. Just nodded and handed me the keys. I thought maybe I would feel guilty. But I didn't. Not even for a moment. On my first night there, I unpacked what little I had brought. A few framed photos from when the kids were young, before everything shifted. A small box of recipes, my knitting bag. That was it. The next morning, I opened my online bank account and set up a few automatic transfers. I closed the old joint savings I had with John, the one he used to help manage bills after his divorce. I transferred the balance into a new private account. Then I blocked his number. Linda didn't even try. She never called me directly anyway. She always went through John. Emily tried a few more times. Left 2 voicemails. The first one sounded confused. "Mom, it's me. I talked to John. He said the house is gone. Did something happen? Can you call me back?" The second one sounded more defensive. "Look, I know things got weird at Christmas, but it was just a joke. You didn't have to make a scene. Can you, please just text me so I know you're okay?" I deleted them both. I didn't leave because of a joke. I left because I finally saw the truth. They didn't see me as a person anymore, just a problem to be solved. John had stopped visiting years ago, only called when he needed something, a check, a signature, a babysitter. Linda never liked me. That much was clear from day one. Emily used to be different. We used to talk. But somewhere along the way, she stopped calling unless she was having a crisis. She never asked how I was doing. She only called to vent. None of them asked what I wanted. Not once. I had paid John's car note for 3 months after he lost his job. I gave Emily money when she said she was thinking about going back to school. I took care of their children, their bills, their needs, and they laughed at me. I didn't say anything that night. I sat there while they joked about memory loss and making things easier before it's too late. But I heard everything, every word, every snide comment, and I remembered. That weekend, in my new town, I walked to the small public library and got a card. I checked out 2 books and stayed for an hour just reading by the window. Nobody interrupted me. Nobody expected anything from me. It was the first peaceful moment I'd had in years. The woman at the front desk, Carla, looked to be about my age. She smiled and said, "You new in town?" I nodded. "Well, welcome. Most people don't move here unless they're trying to get away from something. I'm just trying to get closer to myself," I said. She smiled again and handed me my books. Over the next few days, I started building a new routine. I went to the market on Mondays. I made soup on Tuesdays and froze half of it for later. I read in the afternoons and walked in the mornings. I slept through the night for the first time in a long time, and I didn't tell anyone where I was. But I knew they were trying to find out. I had left a small note taped to the inside of the pantry door back in the old house. It read, "Don't worry. I'm not missing. I'm just somewhere you can't reach me." I imagined John reading that and panicking, not because he was worried, but because he was counting on something that was no longer his. He always assumed the house would be passed down to him, always talked about when we remodel and once we convert the garage. He never asked if I was planning to leave it to him. He just assumed. Linda probably screamed when she found out. She once told me that older people shouldn't be allowed to live alone in big houses when families need space. She said it in front of me like I wasn't there, like I wasn't the one who'd bought the damn house. They weren't mourning me. They were mourning the idea of me, the reliable mother, the quiet helper, the easy solution. But I had already buried that woman. She was gone. One morning, about 10 days after I moved, I got a knock on the door. It startled me. Nobody had knocked. Yet. It was Ray, my next-door neighbor. A retired mechanic with a soft voice and calloused hands. "Hi, I didn't mean to bother you," he said. "Just figured I'd bring you this." He handed me a loaf of banana bread wrapped in foil. My wife used to bake. I try to keep the tradition going. I thanked him. We talked for a few minutes. He didn't ask any personal questions, just told me which nights the trash needed to go out and which neighbors to avoid. After he left, I made tea and ate a slice of the bread. It was dry, but it was kind. I hadn't felt kindness in a long time. I sat at the table and looked at the empty chair across from me, the chair where John used to sit when he came over to vent about his ex, where Emily used to sit when she asked me to help with her rent, the chair where I used to serve everyone, expecting them to see me. I stood up and pushed the chair under the table. I didn't need it anymore. They had made their choices. Now I had made mine. I didn't change my name legally, but around here, nobody asks for that kind of detail. People call me Helen, and that's enough. There's no mom, no grandma, no Mrs. Walker. Just Helen. My neighbor Ray helped me fix the lock on the back door last week. He didn't ask what brought me here. He didn't mention family. He said, "You need anything else?" I said, "No, thank you." And that was the whole conversation. He's the kind of person who understands that silence isn't always a problem to be solved. I go to the local grocery store every Wednesday. They know me by now. The woman behind the register, Louise, tells me about her garden. She calls me Miss Helen, even though she's younger than my daughter Emily. I buy what I need and no more. I carry it myself, and no one hovers. At the shelter where I volunteer, I chop vegetables and wash dishes. I don't speak unless spoken to. Most of the women there are younger than me, some in their 30s, most just trying to stay clean, keep custody, or escape something worse. They're not interested in polite conversation. They like that I listen. One of them, Tanya, asked last week, "You retired or something?" I said, "Something like that." She nodded like that was enough. Back in my old life, I couldn't go a single day without hearing what someone expected from me. I had become invisible and yet constantly used. That contradiction stayed with me. At the shelter, I'm not invisible. I'm quiet, but I'm noticed. A woman thanked me for cutting the carrots thin because her teeth were still healing. Nobody ever thanked me for peeling carrots before. A part of me thought I would miss the noise, the chaos, the family birthdays. But when I look back, I see the truth for what it was. I did all the work, and they took the credit. John hosted Thanksgiving once and told everyone how exhausting it was. I had done it for 30 years without help. At my new place, I bought a small dining table with 2 chairs. One for me, one for no one. I eat slowly, clean my plate, and wash the dish right after. No pile of plates, no trail of snack wrappers from grandkids. No list of groceries I didn't use. Some nights I walk to the end of the block and sit on the bench near the small park. There's a row of pine trees that break the wind. A few kids play there after school. One day, I brought an extra apple and gave it to a boy who had dropped his snack. He didn't ask who I was. He just said thanks and ran off. In my old life, I couldn't do something like that without it becoming a topic of conversation. Why did you give him that? You don't know him. You're too trusting. What if his parents think it's weird? Now nobody questions my decisions. I thought about what John and Linda must be saying. I pictured John panicking when the mortgage company stopped pulling money from the shared account. That account is gone. Every cent that wasn't nailed down was moved. I set up a private trust before I left, with instructions that it can't be touched by either of them. The lawyer said, "Are you sure you want to go this far?" I said, "I'm already gone." Emily might be confused or sad, or maybe just embarrassed. She probably told people I'm staying with a friend. She never liked confrontation. She always tried to soften the blow, but she saw what they said to me at Christmas. She heard the jokes and didn't speak up. That was the moment I knew she wasn't going to protect me. Not from them, not from the idea that I had outlived my usefulness. It took me decades to understand that love isn't the same as respect. They might love me, but they didn't respect me. The night before I left, I sat at my old kitchen table and made a list. I wrote down every time I said yes when I should have said no. I stopped at 47. Then I burned the paper in the sink. I started over. In the second week of January, I signed up for a ceramics class. The community center is 5 blocks from my place. The woman who teaches it, Judith, is in her late 60s. She wears oversized glasses and always has clay on her sleeves. The first time I walked in, she smiled and said, "You're new. You ever worked with your hands before?" I said yes, but never for myself. She nodded like she understood exactly what I meant. On the third class, I made a mug. It's uneven and a little lopsided, but I like how it feels in my hand. When I took it home, I put it on the windowsill where the light hits it in the morning. It's not perfect, but it's mine. I've started to like the way my days unfold now. There's no drama, no guilt, no chores handed to me without asking. I wake up when I want to. I read in the evenings without interruption. I don't have to ask permission to rest. Sometimes I catch myself thinking of moments I used to tolerate. John calling at 10 p.m. needing money. Linda dropping off the kids for just a few hours that turned into overnight. Emily texting me at midnight about something her ex-husband did. None of them ever said, "Do you have the energy for this?" But I gave it anyway. Every time. Now, I give nothing to anyone unless I choose to. At the shelter, one of the women asked if I had grandkids. I hesitated. Then I said, "Yes, but they don't need me anymore." She looked at me for a second and then said, "Lucky, them." I never had anyone at all. It made me think. Maybe I wasn't abandoned. Maybe I was set free. They'll never understand that. That's fine. Let them talk. Let them tell whatever version of the story they need to tell so they don't look bad. Meanwhile, I'll be here, drinking tea from a crooked mug, kneading clay, reading whatever I want. I haven't disappeared. I've just finally arrived. It had been nearly 2 months since I vanished from my old life, and the silence from John and Emily had finally shifted, not into concern, not into reflection, but into panic. I expected it. The silence couldn't last forever, not when I had been the backbone of everything they never had to manage. I first noticed it when my old neighbor in Fairview, Denise, sent me a card. No return address, just my name, which meant she must have gotten it from one of them. Inside, a short note. "They've been knocking on every door asking questions. I didn't say a word. I hope you're okay." That told me more than a phone call ever could. They were looking for me, not because they missed me, but because they finally realized I was really gone. And with me, the unpaid bills, the backup plan, and the predictable cushion they'd always counted on. A week later, I got a letter forwarded from my lawyer, the same one who had helped me put all my finances into the trust. It was from Emily. "Mom, I don't know where you are, but this has gone too far. We need to talk. John is losing his mind. Linda is threatening to file some kind of complaint. I don't even know what that means. Please, just send me a text. Let us know you're okay. That's all I'm asking." That wasn't all she was asking. That was never all they were asking. If I had texted, it would have turned into questions, then demands, then guilt. I had been through the cycle too many times. I didn't respond. The next came from John, handwritten, probably because he knew any official envelope would go straight to trash. "Helen, this isn't funny. I don't know what you're doing, but it's selfish. I tried to help you. I tried to make sure you were looked after. And now you're making things harder for everyone. Emily's stressed. The kids keep asking questions. This isn't how families treat each other. You raised us better than this." That last line stuck with me. You raised us better than this. No, I didn't. I raised them the only way I knew how. I gave, they took. I stayed quiet. They assumed that meant I was content. I never taught them boundaries. I taught them sacrifice. That was my mistake, and I was done paying for it. A few days later, my neighbor Ray brought over a package left at his porch by mistake. No return address, but I knew. The handwriting was Emily's. Inside was a photo album, the old one. The red leather one I had forgotten I even still had. She had kept it, apparently. or found it after I left. There were sticky notes on several pages. This was your first Christmas with us. You made all our Halloween costumes this year? You were the only one who showed up for my piano recital. At the end of the book was a short note. I know you're angry, but please don't shut me out forever. I know I was quiet when I should have defended you. I've been thinking about that every day. Please let me fix it. I don't want to be like them. Emily, I sat with the album open for over an hour. I flipped through the pages slowly. It wasn't the photos that made me emotional. It was what they represented. A time when I thought my effort meant something. When I thought being needed was the same as being loved. Still, I didn't write back. I wasn't ready. And honestly, I wasn't sure she meant it. People say all sorts of things when they lose control. Especially when they think an apology might reset the pieces in their favor. That same week, a certified letter arrived at the legal address of my trust. It was from a lawyer representing John and Linda. The envelope was thick. I sat at my kitchen table and read each page twice. They were claiming financial distress caused by unfulfilled verbal commitments regarding the future inheritance of my house and assets. In other words, they were trying to say that I owed them something. No contracts, no legal standing. Just the audacity of assuming that what I worked for belonged to them. My lawyer called me the next morning. They can file paperwork all day, he said. They're not getting a dime. Let them, I said. Let them dig. It was quiet on the line for a moment. Then he said, You don't sound surprised. I'm not. I wasn't angry either. Not anymore. I felt something colder than anger. A kind of clarity that settles when you finally accept who people really are. I spent that afternoon at the ceramics studio. Judith, the instructor, showed me how to glaze the pieces I had made the week before. I focused on the motion of it. Brush, dip, wipe. My hands didn't shake. For the first time in a long time, I felt steady. At the shelter that week, Tanya, the one who asked if I had grandkids, pulled me aside. You okay? She asked. You seem quieter than usual. I smiled. I'm fine. Just thinking, Guy nodded slowly. You remind me of my grandmother. She left my mom when she was little, just walked out. We didn't know where she went. Years later, we found out she was living on a ranch with horses and a man named Fred. She said it was the happiest she'd ever been. She ever talked to your mom again? I asked. Nope, not once. Said she had already been more mother than anyone deserved. We were quiet for a moment. Then Tanya shrugged. Can't say I blame her. That night, I sat in bed reading and caught myself smiling. Not because of the book, but because of the silence. Nobody was demanding anything. Nobody was expecting me to bend, to clean up, to fix it all again. I was alone. But I wasn't lonely. There's a difference. And now I understood it. The letter from the lawyer representing John and Linda didn't lead anywhere. I knew it wouldn't. The trust was airtight. Every asset had been moved legally, every signature verified. There were no back doors, no loopholes, just walls. For the first time, they couldn't touch what was mine. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful like before. It was a different kind of silence, resentful, heavy, the kind that sits in the room even when you're alone. They had tried everything: guilt, shame, legal threats. None of it worked. I didn't respond to any of it. And so they gave up, at least for now. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Judith at the ceramics studio. She asked if I'd be willing to help teach a new beginner's class. You've got a calm way about you, she said. People like learning from someone who doesn't act like they know everything. I said yes, not because I wanted attention or praise, but because it felt good to be useful on my terms. Not demanded, not expected, chosen. At the shelter, things had shifted too. I wasn't just helping in the kitchen anymore. One of the counselors asked if I'd sit in on a few intake interviews. Sometimes women opened up more to someone who didn't work there officially. Someone who didn't carry a clipboard. I said I'd try. I met one woman named Diana, who had a bruise on her neck and a voice that shook when she spoke. She said, "You remind me of my mom. Only She never listened. To me, you do. That stuck with me for days. Meanwhile, life back in Fairview was unraveling faster than I'd expected. I didn't ask for updates, but they came anyway. A former neighbor, Marcia, sent a message through the shelter's general email account. It was addressed to me. Helen, I don't know what happened, but I think you should know. John's house is up for sale. Rumor is they're struggling financially. Linda was overheard yelling in the yard last weekend. Something about counting on the house and, this is what happens when you let her vanish. I didn't say anything. I just thought you should. No, I read the message twice. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel pity either. Just confirmation. They hadn't wanted me. They had wanted what they thought I would leave behind. I didn't owe them that. I had worked for every dollar. Scrubbed floors, clipped coupons. Went without for years so they wouldn't have to. And the moment they thought I was too old to be useful, they had started planning my exit. Linda had once said, "You should really think about downsizing, Helen. That house is too much for one person." But she hadn't meant for me to choose where to go. She meant for them to choose what to take. Now the house was sold, but the money wasn't in their account. I had transferred the funds into a grant, quietly, no names attached. It would support women over 60 leaving abusive homes or financial dependency. The first recipient had been a woman named Janice. She sent a thank you note, even though she didn't know where the funds had come from. I didn't think anyone would ever believe I was worth helping. Whoever you are, thank you. I kept that note in my kitchen drawer, right next to the folder where I had once stored every bank statement John used to ask me to print. Emily hadn't written again. No letters, no more photos, no voicemails. I assumed she was waiting. For me to calm down, maybe. For time to do the work she didn't want to. I didn't hate her. But I didn't miss her either. That realization came slowly, like a faucet dripping instead of a flood. I always thought I needed her more than she needed me, that if she just apologized, we could go back. But I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to be the mother who sits quietly while her children talk over her. I didn't want to be the grandmother who only gets invited when a babysitter cancels. I didn't want to be convenient anymore. I wanted to be seen. At the ceramics studio, Judith handed me a check one day. For the new class. You earned it. I stared at it. Not because of the amount, but because it was the first time in years that I had been paid for my time. Later that week, I used the money to buy a new set of clothes. Nothing fancy. Just a few shirts, a better coat for the colder months, and shoes that didn't pinch. Things I hadn't bothered buying before, because I was always putting others first. The woman at the register smiled and said, "Starting fresh?" I said, "Yes, something like that." Ray helped me carry the bags in that afternoon. He noticed the new shoes. "Looking sharp," he said. "You think anyone will recognize me?" I joked. He shrugged. "Depends who's looking." At the shelter, Diana finally opened up. She said she was scared to go back home, scared she'd end up like her mother, who stayed too long and never left. I told her, leaving doesn't mean you have to explain everything. Sometimes leaving is the explanation. She nodded. She didn't know I was speaking from experience. That weekend, I sat on my small porch with a cup of tea and the photo album Emily had sent. I opened it again, not out of nostalgia, but to remind myself what I had survived. Every photo was a moment I had given. Every caption she added was an admission that, at some point, they had seen it. They had just forgotten. That was the difference between who I used to be and who I was now. I remembered everything, and I had decided not to go back. It was a Friday morning when Emily showed up. I had just finished my usual walk to the bakery at the end of the block, bought the same 2 rolls, same cup of black coffee, sat at the same table near the window, where I could see the park across the street. A quiet routine. I didn't notice her at first. I wasn't expecting anyone. But when I turned to leave, there she was, standing by the entrance, arms crossed, eyes wide like she'd seen a ghost. She didn't say anything for a moment, just stared at me like she wasn't sure if it was really me. I didn't move. Then, she said, "Hi, Mom." I didn't answer. Not right away. I looked her over. She looked thinner than I remembered. Tired, like she hadn't been sleeping. But she was still wearing expensive shoes and her nails were manicured. The contrast hit me hard. I had seen this look before, but never aimed at me like this. "I didn't think I'd find you," she said finally. "John hired someone. I didn't want to, but he said we had to know you were okay." "So that's what this is?" I asked. "You're checking off a box?" "No," she said quickly. "I'm here because I wanted to see you. I've wanted to for weeks." I didn't respond. I walked past her and out the door. I didn't invite her to follow me, but she did. We walked the 2 blocks to my place in silence. She kept looking around, probably expecting something else. Something bigger, fancier. What she saw was a modest building, a small porch, and flower pots I had planted with Ray's help. When we got inside, I put the bag of rolls on the counter and made tea. I didn't ask if she wanted any. She sat at the table and looked around like she was still trying to figure out where she was. "This place is—" she began. "Enough," I said. She nodded. There were no photos on the walls, no framed certificates. Just one small painting I had made in ceramics class. A blue vase with uneven edges. I noticed her eyes pause there for a moment. Then she said, "Why didn't you tell me? Just me. You didn't have to tell John, but me." I sat down across from her and finally met her eyes. "I did tell you, Emily. Every time you looked the other way. Every time you stayed quiet. That was me telling you." Her face dropped. I didn't know what to say. "You didn't have to say anything. You just had to not laugh or look away. But you didn't stop it. You didn't speak up when it mattered." She looked down at her hands. "I know," she whispered. We sat in silence while the kettle heated. Then she said, "You were the only one who ever showed up for me. And I didn't do the same for you. I don't know how to make that right." I got up, poured the tea and brought it to the table. "You don't." She looked at me again, eyes wet. "I didn't come here to take anything. I swear. I needed to see you. I needed to say I'm sorry. Not just for Christmas. For everything." I didn't speak. I drank my tea. "I saw the grant," she added after a moment. "I saw your name attached to it. The one for women over 60. John doesn't know. He never checked." I didn't reply. "I thought I understood what kind of woman you were, and I was wrong. You weren't just my mother. You were surviving in a house that didn't respect you. And I watched it happen." I could feel her watching, my face waiting for a crack. But there wasn't one. "I didn't come here to ask for forgiveness," she said. "I came because I miss you." I put the cup down. "I don't miss who I used to be," I said. "I don't miss how I was treated. But I miss the version of you that saw me. The little girl who used to crawl into bed with me when she had nightmares. The one who used to draw pictures of us holding hands." She nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks now. "I still have those drawings," I added, "in a folder. Not because I was holding on to you, but because I was holding on to the idea that one day you'd come back as that person." "I want to be," she said, her voice cracking. I let that sit. Then I said, "You don't get to fix this in one visit. That's not how it works." "I know. And I'm not moving back. I'm not coming home. This is my life now." "I'm not asking you to," she said. Can I visit? Just sometimes? You don't even have to answer now." I didn't answer. We finished our tea in silence. When she stood to leave, she hesitated. "Mom?" she asked softly. "Yes. You were always enough. I just didn't realize it." She left. I didn't walk her out. That night, I sat on the porch with Ray. He didn't ask anything. He never did. We just sat and listened to the wind move through the trees. "She came," I said finally. He nodded. "She said she missed me." "Do you believe her?" "I think she believes." We sat a while longer. Then he said, "Some people change, some don't." I nodded. "I'm not waiting to find out." A week later, a letter arrived. It was from Diana, the woman from the shelter. She had moved into a shared apartment, gotten a part-time job. She wrote, "Thank you for listening. You were the first person who didn't ask me to explain myself." I placed the letter next to Janice's. Then I sat down with a fresh sheet of paper and began to write, not to John, not to Emily, but to the director of the shelter. I told them I wanted to start a new workshop. Something simple, something steady. A space for women to learn a craft, sit in silence, or talk when they felt safe enough. A room where nobody demanded anything from them. I signed it with my full name, Helen Walker. No titles, no roles, just me. That was enough.